Welcome here, everyone. I'm glad you could join me for this breakout session on solving problems in the TK classroom. We're going to talk about what to do and, almost more importantly, what not to do. Our problem solving will be from two perspectives, solving some problems of what we as educators do, but also looking at what problem solving looks like for that TK student. My name is John Dewick. I work in Fresno at the County Office of Education under the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. You can see on this slide my contact information. You are welcome to email me, hit me up on Twitter, whatever is easiest for you if you have questions, comments, or would like more information. We'll go through all of this and hopefully we'll be able to learn together and have some different points to think about, consider, and look at throughout our time. So right now, let's stop for a moment. Consider where you are right now. You just heard our keynote speaker. We've been taking on a lot of information, taking in a lot of information. So I want you to set aside what's going to come next, what's going to come later, and just consider this upcoming content. You can rewatch this later on. You can listen for certain points and say, oh, I want to hear what that guy said, and come back to this at your leisure. So take a deep breath. It's evening. You've had a full day. So now as we dig into this content, let's take a deep breath and spend some time talking about all the information that is coming our way and how we can add some problem solving into our TK classroom. Consider now, what is TK? TK is not a 2-year kindergarten program. We don't want to hold back kindergarten information and standards, but we also don't want to push too hard. We're taking something that was historically something for preschool teachers to work on and moving it into that K-12 realm. Now we call it a TK-12 realm. So, and again, it's not simply about starting kindergarten earlier, but considering what's going on in kindergarten that can be deepened, built for, and considered for these students who are 4 years old as we move forward. We're going to talk about what we can emphasize and what we can delay, what we don't have to push for, but what we can really consider at a, like I said, deeper level. When you hear me say delay, what are some things that come to mind? Because we all know that no one likes to put off the good things. There's things we like teaching, things that we love teaching that we want to move forward with. So when I use the word delay, I think about pictures like this. When I'm driving somewhere and there's construction going on and I have to wait for something, that's a delay. Many of us feel the frustration with this kind of delay when we're at an airport waiting to go somewhere. The worry about what's coming next, the concern over how we might be put off for something. But these delays are something that are inevitable, and we want to talk about what is not inevitable, what can we plan for and consider when it comes to delaying certain things for our students. Because what we don't want is to have our students feeling like this, where they're overwhelmed, they're being pushed, and we're emphasizing too many things. So sometimes our students feel a delay frustration because they're ready for more. Sometimes they feel an emphasized frustration of, I'm being pushed too hard, I'm not ready for some of this. And we always want to consider that that TK classroom needs to have a lot of time for play, time for interactions, time for students to talk, to look around, and mimic. We know as early educators the different stages that children go through when it comes to play, sometimes mimicking others, playing with others, playing alone, and how those all flow together. We want to make sure that we offer that time that is quality, but also relaxing as our students move forward with playtime, learning time, and how that meshes together. As an educator, I want to make sure that when I'm with my students, we're discussing things, discovering things, looking for different ways to represent the math that is out there. This goes beyond just the math, it goes into other content areas. When we consider what it looks like in our reading, in our science, when we talk about our neighborhood, our family, and everything around us. How can we discover, represent, and consider all the different pieces that go into a TK classroom and move forward with deepening the depth, the content of what they'll be looking forward to in kindergarten and beyond. So let's talk about what it means to delay something. This is about holding back, giving time for other things. There's certainly times we want to delay gratification for something because we know something better is coming. In education, this is about not creating too busy of a schedule, but considering what can and what should wait. There are certain things that we know students will get in kindergarten, in first grade, second grade. And often we think, well, I can do that now. Even though they're 4 years old, they can handle more. And they likely can handle more. We want to make sure that we don't push for more when instead we could be deepening the understanding to give them a greater base of mathematics, a greater base of number sense. Every teacher, all the way through high school, says, my students don't have enough number sense. We can start by helping in TK. How can we develop a deeper sense of number sense, place value, counting as we move forward? So again, delay isn't necessarily about holding back the good stuff, but holding back so that they get better things right now. We're going to be looking at solving problems in this TK classroom with some help from my colleagues in San Diego at the San Diego County Office of Education. My colleague Mark Alcorn put some content together in terms of what we can emphasize in delay. And with his permission, I'll be sharing a portion of that with you as he is still finalizing what that can look like. We're going to look at two different portions of that work today. The first one is going to be looking at counting and operations and what that can look like. So when you think about counting and operations, this is going to be a blend of what happens on the DRDP in the preschool, but also what's going on in that TK classroom moving towards what happens in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and so on. So in counting and operations, we're going to look at how we can emphasize counting objects, but also asking a child questions, things like what if, what do you think about this, what might this look like? And we're going to delay a couple of things. We don't have to get into symbolic notation, and we don't have to emphasize or overemphasize the naming of numerals. We're just counting, we're looking at things. There are pieces that will come up that we can discuss, but it's not about pushing for these things to happen. So again, going back to just simply counting, having a good time with numbers and exploring. We can name, but don't want to emphasize. We can write, but it's not the priority. These are all things that are good to do and we want to do, but that shouldn't be our focus as we move forward, as we consider how we can push deeper into other areas. This looks like counting at a deeper level. So fluency within 5 is something that is not expected till, well, that says end of kindergarten. That's a typo. But we want to go up to about 20 and consider what that looks like for these students when they're in kindergarten. So in TK, we don't have to go that high. When we're looking at the DRDP, we're talking about around 5 to 10 as we move forward, getting it to 20 when they're just reciting those numbers. So a lot of exploring, a lot of checking things out, practicing what this looks like over and over again, that repetition. This comes out of the DREAM work, D-R-E-M-E, which has a base in Stanford. The website is listed there below, and you're more than welcome to click on that and check that out for more information. But that DREAM network has all sorts of information that talks about what it looks like to count objects and explore. So let's focus on counting objects and what that looks like. We'll talk about exploring in a little while. Here's a sample. Now this is a stock photo that I found, and I'll show you one that I created, where the student is taking these pom-poms and placing them into bottle caps right there. This teacher has glued them onto a piece of cardboard and made a really simple way for students to count and look at what that looks like. So we've got someone who's able to do one-to-one correspondence as they put them in there. It's a tactile experience with moving things. They're looking at having number recognition with 1 through 5. They're getting the concept of amounts as they look at how much is 1, how much is 2, how much is 3, etc., up through 5. And they're also subitizing at what does 3 look like, what does 4 look like, what does 1 look like. So there's a lot going on here that we can take advantage of for our students, and it gives them a chance to count objects over and over again. I created this really simple piece of clip art here where I found a lily pad online. I was able to copy and paste it a few times. You can get these little frogs, like 1,000 frogs for a pretty cheap price. So this is one more way where students can move their frogs to cover the lily pads, and again, counting with 1 through 5. Talking about what that looks like, touching them to move them back and forth. Of course, they're going to play with them a bit because they're frogs and fun to do, just like they would with the pom-poms. But moving these pieces around, again, subitizing as they go along, doing that one-to-one between the frog and the lily pad. This can be a student-led center or it can be a teacher-led center as you move forward. My office is located right next to a preschool. literally across the hall. So I can go in there and practice with students, work with the students, play these games with them, and talk about them. So I have students from birth through 5 that I can talk about all these numbers with and practice with, play with, and learn from as we go along. And these kinds of things are enjoyable for them. So I took some cupcake liners that I had at home and also some pom-poms that we just had in the building and was able to create a very similar experience for students. So I could write the numbers 1 through 5, and I had them moving the pom-poms back and forth. But we want our kids to be able to look at these things for very simple around-the-house pieces. Not every house has cupcake liners and pom-poms, but many have cupcake liners or something you could use like that. But maybe you could use beans or small rocks and pebbles. You could use Legos or blocks of some kind. The different sizes aren't as important as having that piece where students can move back and forth, practice their counting, looking at the different numbers and how that fits together. It doesn't have to be the numerals. It could also be dots that show that amount. So they can subotize when they look at how many dots there are, move the right number of pom-poms. At one point when we were doing this in the preschool classroom with 4- and 5-year-olds, the teacher pulled out some salad tongs that she had in one of her cabinets, and the students were moving the pom-poms with the salad tongs just to make it a little bit more fun. We also want to consider what this can look like at home. Is this something that a parent could recreate or would be easily replicated by the people that we work with so that they can see how this fits together and not make a lot more work for people, but consider how to create these experiences for our 4- and 5-year-olds where they're interacting with the dots, with the pom-poms, with the frogs, with the rocks and the beans to count, to connect, and look at how that all works together with 1-to-1 and also looking at that growth of numbers from 1 through 5. And this doesn't have to obviously stop at 5. It can move on to whatever numbers you want to as you move along. This comes from the Dream website talking about counting collections. And we're moving into what counting collections look like with these past examples. I'll read it out loud and you can follow along. And I obviously have some bolded pieces which we can look at and we'll talk about. Similar to other kinds of counting activities, the goal is to engage students in coordinating the various aspects of counting in order to find out how many are in the given set of objects. What might be different about counting collections, however, is that children are encouraged to count and represent in ways that make sense to them without an adult doing a demonstration first. As children count, they might move objects in and out of containers, organize in a line, sort into groups by color, slide from one pile to another, etc. As children represent, they might trace the objects, make a series of small marks, and place the objects on top to make sure they match, write a sequence of numerals, etc. Additionally, collections often have more objects than are usually given to young children, which often encourages children to organize and to count further in the counting sequence. So counting collections might be new to you, or it might be something that you've been doing. On a side note, a colleague of mine, Shannon Crass, presented at the past conference on counting collections. And you can go to the Early Math website and find that if you'd like to listen to her breakout session on counting collections solely. It's a great experience and something to learn from. But let's talk about these highlighted areas and get a little bit deeper into those. The idea here is thinking about how we can get students to count, to group, and look at. When we're in TK, we may have up to 20 items that the students are counting and sorting. They might group them in 2s or 5s or 10s. They may keep them all individual. They might line them up. They might stack them. It's whatever works for them. But we want them to be able to make sense out of how many there are and what that might look like. So when we give students these objects to count, these objects to sort, they set them up in whatever works best for them. And we can ask them questions about what that looks like, talking about how many there are, how they know how many there are, and letting them deepen their understanding of those amounts and how they can put them together. That final piece there that's highlighted, bolded, that says more objects than are usually given. Consider this something to really balance. This whole breakout session is on what to emphasize and what to delay. So don't think that because you can give a 4-year-old 50 objects that you're doing a great thing. It's not a bad thing, but make sure that they're ready for it, that we're deepening their understanding, not just pushing them to higher numbers. We want them grouping things in an appropriate way, not just counting higher. Because sometimes this becomes a simple recitation of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with a different number in the tens place. It's a good thing to be able to recite that and to consider it, but don't push when students aren't ready for it. Push when appropriate and make sure you balance that piece with what that can look like. As you do counting collections, you can ask questions like, how many did you count or have altogether? Can you collect them in a different way, in a different strategy to do that? And will your answer be the same no matter how you do that? Will there always be that same number in that collection? And your collection might consist of plastic frogs or pom-poms or pencils, keychains, pens, markers. Every TK classroom, every preschool classroom has so many different manipulatives available that you can put out for them to count. My wife and I like to go to estate sales, and we find lots of different things that I can use for counting collections at different houses where we have people who collected whatever it was, and I can manage to bring those together and purchase them for inexpensive and have fun things for my preschoolers to count and my TK students to put in counting collections. Let's stop for a moment and consider what this might look like in your classroom. I'll stop talking. I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute, and you can think about, here's some great information, hopefully, that you can take back. What might this look like? So I'll be silent for a moment, and then we'll come back together. I'll draw you back in right now. One thing that's difficult about a virtual conference versus a live conference is we can't have those conversations in small groups. So hopefully that time to consider, to perhaps journal, was valuable for you as you think about what this will look like for you back in your classroom with your students. Let's keep going on talking about exploring. We finished talking about counting objects, and as we go into exploring, considering what it looks like to be out, looking at where these numbers are and what that looks like. Here, with the Early Math Initiative, we've built a math app, a website type place online that you can go to watch videos that will give you as educators ideas on how you can support your students. It has children's books that you can use that have a math tie-in, and then activities that go along with those books. They're all free and available for you, and everything can be printed out and simply used as it is with very few things added in. But we also are connected to a number of videos that show you what that can look like. And we encourage you to show these to your parents, to your families, to your community, because they are ways that you can see the math all around you and in your world. There are things that we as educators and as parents don't always recognize we can be doing with our students, and so these videos will help with that. So the website, the web app, is called countplayexplore.org, and we're going to watch a video now called The Wide World of Math Number Detectives Video. So I'll hit play, and we'll watch this together.
Ange, we have a problem.
And what's that, Phil?
Fresh off the presses. Numbers, Ange. Numbers. They've been reported missing all over the city. Meet Isabella Perez and her grandma, Inez.
Quite a detective team. If anyone can find the numbers, it's these two.
Isabella, I hear few numbers are missing. Let's keep our eyes peeled for number 5. Where could it be, number 5? What about there?
No.
What about there?
No.
Where is that number 5?
There's a number 5.
That's some 5-star detective work.
Now that we found number 5, I've been told that number 3 may also be in the area. Could it be over there?
No.
What about there?
Just
what about...
right there. Number 3.
Number 3. Let's do a 3.
Isabella's proving herself to be anything but a rookie.
Maybe so, but this last one's gonna be challenging. Lucky number 7.
Now let's go and look for number 7.
Sometimes it turns out to be right in front of your face, hidden in plain sight.
Where could it be, number 7?
Look, I have it.
Oh!
I'm in 7th math heaven.
Thanks for letting us come along, number detectives.
We found them all! Let's go and get ice cream.
Hey, Ange, you're in my book.
Thanks, Phil. Well, that's all for today, math fans. Play hard, study harder.
Number 1.
I get it.
Wasn't that a great video? You got to watch Isabel and her grandma as they walked around town, looking for the number 5, looking for the number 3, and finally a number that's on her shirt. So there are more videos like this, over 30 of them currently created, and more that will be on their way in the coming months. But we encourage you to take videos like this, watch more videos at Count, Play, Explore, and think about how you can count objects in your home, how you can count objects in your classroom, in the play yard, on the playground, when you're going for a walk. Where can you find these numbers around you or these amounts around you? So Count, Play, Explore has many different ideas and thoughts on what you can do about that. And that is where the problem solving comes in. Where can you find the number 2? Where can you find 2 of something? When you're walking around or when you're sitting in your circle time or your morning routine time, talking about where you can find these numbers or where you can find these amounts. Where can you find 5 of something? Where can you find the number 10? These are all different ways for students to explore and realize that the world around them has math everywhere. We can also look at problems like this as we move forward, where if you have 2 blocks and receive another block, how many blocks are there? We don't have to write down the expression or the equation. We can just talk about how many there are and have the students count them and touch them and consider what's in front of them and what that looks like. If I have 4 blocks, how can I break them into 2 groups? Is there a different way? Consider this. In the first bullet, there's 1 answer, because if you have 2 blocks and receive another one, you're going to have 3. But if you have 4 blocks, I can break those into groups of 2 and 2, or 1 and 3, or 3 and 1. And although 1 and 3 and 3 and 1 are just reversed, there is a difference in the way that we break them apart and move them. And talking with our students about that property is an important piece to recognize that we can add in more than one direction. It doesn't matter what they are. And that second bullet, having more than one answer, is a crucial thing as we consider that in math we often say all math has just one final answer. But there are ways that we can structure our words to where we can grow bigger and consider all the different pieces that go into the math around us. So, really emphasize the idea of counting objects and asking children many questions, open-ended questions, to consider that math that they are interacting with. We don't need to worry about symbolic notation or the names and worrying about those types of things. Just have conversations and talking with your children. And if they come up, that's an appropriate time to do it. But it's nothing that we're pushing for. Again, we can delay that and emphasize a deepening of the math that they are doing much more simply. We just want to really consider what we don't have to do. When we get overwhelmed with all that goes on and how much we're trying to work with and how we're trying to support our students in so many ways, there's just a lot of things that we can set to the side and, again, delay. Writing from 0 to 20 is a kindergarten standard, and the DRDP for preschool is only counting to 10 and reciting to 20. So we don't have to go bigger than that. We go bigger than that if we want to and if it's appropriate with some of our students or maybe all of our students. But we don't have to go beyond that and worry that we're doing a disservice to those kindergarten teachers. You're preparing them well when you have a deep level of work. With that, we're going to gain a better counting sequence. Our students will have a stronger one-to-one correspondence, better cardinality, better grouping. These gains are huge, and we want to make sure that we spend time really going into what that can look like. With our counting sequence, we know that there's an ordered sequence and there's number names and that sequence is going to be the same every time. That we'll always start with 1 and that we can extend that, but we can repeat that over again, always with 1 and moving forward. That's how our base 10 system works. And we also want to consider in the problem where we have the lily pads and the frogs, where it's one-to-one correspondence, that there's the exact number that goes on there and we can assign that spot to them. And finally, cardinality, that last number that you say is how many that there are. So whether it's simply counting or a more formal counting collection, that if there are 12 of something, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, there are 12. And you know, as a teacher of young children, that not every child gets that until they've practiced it and worked with that over and over again. I'll give you time to just read over this one more time before we move on. One final piece on these gains, I showed this slide earlier. We're going to get deeper into grouping and what that looks like with our next topic. So the second and final topic, now that we've talked about counting in numbers, is going into spatial relationships. So again, this work is coming out of the San Diego County Office of Ed, and I certainly appreciate the work that they have done for this and how they've offered for me to share that with you today. What we will not be getting into today is some information on measurement and data and algebra and patterns. But this will be coming out soon. We'll be sharing that. They will be sharing that through their work, and then we're also doing some work together in tandem with them where we're going to be sharing information to support TK teachers as that grade level grows and grows in the coming years. In spatial relationships, we're going to talk about what to emphasize in delay, thinking about how we want our students to build with shapes, how they can take smaller shapes and make larger shapes, break them apart, and have some informal descriptions about what they are. This isn't about formal names. It's not about having everything memorized and being able to label everything, but just talking about what these things are. Now, if these names come up and students are ready for them, that's a wonderful thing. But we really just want to push the idea of play, talking about how these shapes fit together, how the sides fit together, about the corners, and whatever vocabulary fits in that moment. We're not ruining our kids if we don't give them formal language when they're 4 years old. That will build as time goes by. We have plenty of time to do that. This is a time to play and explore. So that looks like playing with the shapes, talking about the shapes, talking about their locations, and locations, period. So we're going to talk about all 4 of those things. First, we're going to talk about just simply playing with shapes. You've heard me use the word play quite a bit, and I'll keep using that because we really want our students to have a good time and enjoy being at school. We don't want 4-year-olds to be overwhelmed with another school day, but to look forward to a time of interacting and enjoying the math, the reading, the neighborhood, and the community all around them. So playing shapes with shapes often starts with something like pattern blocks, where you can do a linear pattern where you put them in a line, or in a symmetrical pattern that maybe is exponentially growing out in a circle or square of some kind. Many students start with that yellow hexagon when they move forward. So it's a great idea to just put these out and let them play with them. And as time goes by, maybe start asking some more questions about how they make their pattern, what would come next, and what they feel like doing. We can also put out pages like this that you can print out where students can set the pattern blocks on there. This somewhat goes back to the idea of lily pads and frogs, but we're not counting them so much as just looking for designs and layouts. That importance of play is good for their social development, their emotional development, their cognitive development, and their physical development. We want them to interact between the self and others to help them become more interactive with the world around them and not to risk failure. We want them to enjoy the fact that maybe they got something wrong or maybe something doesn't fit right, and that's okay. We want to make sure that they have a growth mindset where they can look forward to just trying something without worrying about what the outcome will be. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit the first time. It doesn't matter if they're wrong the first time. We're just playing with this and seeing what that can look like. We also want them to be talking about their shapes and what that looks like. Beyond pattern blocks, you may also have tangrams. So this was a horrible picture. I took this over my desk, and I have a horrible shadow from me and my phone on there. But you get the idea of what those tangrams can look like. It's a 7-piece set, and you want to try and make a square using all 7 pieces. Here I've only used 4 of them to make a square. But we want our kids to just talk about what these shapes are and how they fit together. How can you put them side by side? How can you stack them? What can they look like? What can you make out of this? A student might say, I built a house. Or maybe they'll call it something different. Whatever that looks like to them, that's the right answer because we're just playing here. Again, we're not doing something formal. We're just having a conversation. Perhaps the word corners and sides will come up. What does it look like will come up as we talk about these shapes, and in doing so, prepare them for talking about math when they get into those upper grades once they leave TK. So we also want to talk about the shapes and describing locations. So for this, we're going to go back to countplayexplore.org, and we're going to look at one more video called Shape Safari. So we'll watch Shape Safari, and then you can consider what that might look like for you.
Okay, Jake, you ready for another adventure?
Ready?
All right, hold on to your car seat. It's time for a Shape Safari. Woo! We are now heading deep into the wilds of Shape Country. Be on the lookout for the elusive triangle.
Look, there's one triangle.
All right, good job, bud. Now, let's see if we can find a square. They're not easy to spot, and they often hide in the trees.
Square.
right, good job, bud. Can you find a circle?
There's a circle
Where?
right there.
It was right under my nose. All right, now I've saved the hardest question for last. You ready?
Yes,
What do you want for dinner?
a circle.
Hey, Jake, a circle is not a food, buddy.
But it's a shape.
Oh, all right. Good job, bud. And the winner of today's Shape Safari is Jake.
Woo!
And for answering all the questions correct today, you have won a round pizza. Yes, a pizza made of round pepperonis. Yes.
Thanks, Dad.
Hey, Jake, I'm hungry. What do you think about a couple slices of circle?
Sounds good.
That is one of my favorite videos, watching the parent and child driving along, looking at all the different shapes and talking about them. What a fun thing that we can be doing with our own children, and encouraging the families that we know to do the same thing. Perhaps you can send this video out. You can share it with your moms, dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, caretakers when they do that, because they can have a shape safari themselves. And you can do that also, whether it's in your classroom, outside, when you're going for a walk with your students, when it's time for lunch or a snack. You can be talking about a shape safari when you're going along. But we also, again, want to be able to encourage our families to do the same thing, to talk about math all around them. That math doesn't just happen in school or in the classroom, but it happens at home. Everywhere you are, there's math around us. So think back to those tangrams and consider about, can you make a square using triangles? Can you make a larger square using more triangles? What might that look like? And we also talk about location when we maybe have our bears that are available. We all have those red, blue, yellow, green bears of perhaps different sizes. And can you place the blue bear behind the red bear, or the blue bear next to the yellow bear? All those locations are important conversations to have about the math around us. What's in front, what's behind, next to, on top of, under, as we move forward. Using shapes, using bears, the different manipulatives that you may have in your classroom. We want this to be an everyday conversation that we become comfortable with and our students become comfortable with. Consider again, we don't have to worry about memorizing formal names. If that comes up, that's not a problem, but this is what I would call easy talk. It's conversational, it's comfortable. It's not about being worried about the proper names and how they pronounce it, but just talking about the math, the shapes, the locations around us, and where they can find it. When we do this, we're helping them navigate all the world around them, what we are, what we see. They're grouping things in their mind. The different attributes are starting to come forward. And this moves into sorting, classifying, and looking again at all those different attributes for the math that we look like. There's big gains that come from this because we're all moving around and looking at things with us. If you are someone that works with children as young as 18 months, we're talking about trial and error as they look at what fits and what doesn't fit. They're clumsy and they have less fine motor skills, but they're just trying to fit shapes in and see what that looks like. They're learning all about their space and their space around them. And then that 3-year-old's able to predict a little bit more about how things will fit together. And they might not try everything that's available, but they'll try a few things. This information is on the CDE website. So if you would go to the California Department of Ed, you can look up some different pieces about preschool and TK and look at how you can consider that spatial language and what that can look like. But again, we're sorting, we're classifying. We can use these frogs again to do that and look at how the different colors interact. We can also take shapes and fit them in. Now, I had this Tupperware toy when I was growing up, and I just assumed that everybody had the same Tupperware toy that I did. Turns out I was unique. But toys like this where people fit the shapes in and see how that works, pushing this around, rolling this around, to see how to fit the shapes into the different holes is a great task for students to think about the world around them, what fits, what doesn't fit, and what that looks like. So now consider, with these gains, what we're looking at, what is something that you can do? So let's take 30 seconds and consider what will be different now that we've spent this time together. Maybe take a piece of paper, or maybe on your phone, or whatever you're viewing this on, and write in, I'm going to try this one new thing. So it's one new thing that you'll try based on what we've talked about. I'll give you 30 seconds to consider that. I'll close with this. Just remember that we are all math people. Some of us are afraid of math. Some of us aren't certain about the math. We love to read to our students, but we're never sure where this leads to and why we're doing certain things. To be a math person, you just have to do math and be a person. You can do math with your TK student. It's all around us. We can interact with it. We can talk about it. We can have a good time doing this math. Thank you for attending this session. Hopefully you were able to get some great information on what to emphasize, what to delay, and how to do some good problem solving with your kids with the math that's all around them. Again, my information is all right there. My name is John Dewick, and I appreciate you being a part of this session and hope you contact me with any questions or comments as you move forward. Thank you.